My name is Hannah, and I'm 34 years old now, but I'll never forget that cold October night when I was 8 and my parents threw me out of our house. I stood on the sidewalk shivering in my thin jacket, watching the door slam shut. Their alcohol and gambling problems had finally reached a breaking point, and somehow I was to blame. I wandered through the darkness until my Aunt Sarah found me and gave me the home I never had. If you're watching this story, please let me know where you're from in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if my journey resonates with you. Trust me, the path to healing was long, but worth every step. Growing up, I had glimpses of what a normal family might look like. Brief moments when Dad would swing me around in the backyard, or Mum would read me a bedtime story. But those memories are like faded photographs now yellowed at the edges and increasingly hard to recall with clarity. I was born in a small town in Ohio where everybody knew everybody's business. Our house wasn't anything special, just a modest 2-bedroom with peeling blue paint on the porch steps, but it was home. Mum worked as a cashier at the local supermarket, and Dad was a mechanic at Johnson's auto shop downtown. We weren't rich by any means, but there was food on the table and warmth in the winter. I remember my 6th birthday when Dad brought home a second-hand bike with streamers on the handlebars. His eyes lit up watching me ride wobbly circles in our driveway. Mum took pictures with her old camera laughing when I nearly crashed into the bushes. That day we felt like a real family, but looking back, I can see the cracks that were already forming. The way Dad's breath would smell different on Friday nights, when he came home later than usual. The hushed arguments I'd hear through my bedroom wall when they thought I was asleep. Things changed drastically when I turned 7. Dad started coming home smelling like that strange odor almost every night. Mum's smile appeared less frequently, replaced by tight lips and worried glances at bills spread across the kitchen table. Their voices grew louder, less concerned about whether I could hear them fighting. "You spent our mortgage money again, didn't you?" Mum would scream. "Get off my back, woman. I'll win it back next time," Dad would shout back. I learnt to make myself invisible during these moments, hiding in my room with my hands over my ears, sometimes humming to drown out their voices. I'd lose myself in books from the school library, imagining I lived in those stories instead of my own. The real trouble started when Dad lost his job at the auto shop. Mr. Johnson caught him drinking on the job after a customer complained about smelling alcohol while picking up their car. Dad came home that day and broke 3 plates against the wall. Mum just stood there, arms crossed, as if she'd been expecting this day to come. After that, Mum started working double shifts at the supermarket. Sometimes I wouldn't see her for days, except for brief moments in the morning before school. Dad would sleep until noon, then disappear until evening. He'd return with bloodshot eyes, sometimes with cash in his pockets, other times with nothing but excuses and anger. I became very self-sufficient for an 8-year-old. I learnt to make sandwiches for dinner when nobody cooked. I figured out how to set my own alarm clock for school, how to pick out clothes that matched, how to brush my hair into a ponytail that didn't look too messy. I'd pack my own lunch when there was food in the fridge, and when there wasn't, I'd tell my teacher I forgot it. My mum's sister Aunt Sarah would visit sometimes. She lived about 2 hours away in Cincinnati. I loved when she came over. She always brought me little gifts, nothing expensive, just small treasures like colourful pencils or a hair clip shaped like a butterfly. She'd look around our increasingly messy house with worried eyes. "Hannah, are you doing okay, sweetie?" she'd ask when my parents weren't in earshot. I always nodded and smiled. I was good at pretending everything was fine. Children are adaptable that way, accepting whatever reality they're given as normal. School became my sanctuary. I loved my 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Wilson. She had kind eyes and never raised her voice. Sometimes she'd let me stay in the classroom during recess when it was too cold outside. I think she knew something wasn't right at home, but she never pried. She just created a safe space for me, and I soaked up her kindness like a plant desperately turning toward the sun. I had a few friends at school, though I never invited them over. Our house had become too unpredictable, too chaotic. Sometimes there would be strange men sitting around the kitchen table with Dad playing cards late into the night. Other times the electricity would be out for days, and we'd use candles to see. The day everything changed started like any other. I woke up, got dressed, and walked myself to school. It was a Thursday in October, and there was a math test I'd studied for. I remember feeling proud because I got every problem right. Mrs. Wilson had drawn a smiley face on my paper. I carefully folded the test and put it in my backpack to show Mum, hoping it might make her smile. I walked home that afternoon with no idea that by nightfall I would no longer have a place to call home. No idea that the life I knew, difficult as it was about to be completely upended. I was just an 8-year-old girl clutching a perfect math test, hoping for a moment of approval from parents who had long since stopped seeing me. The moment I pushed open our front door that Thursday afternoon, I knew something was terribly wrong. The house smelled like whiskey and cigarettes stronger than usual. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink and empty bottles littered the coffee table. My perfect math test suddenly felt insignificant in my hand. "Mum, Dad," I called out, my voice small in the messy house. I heard sobbing coming from the kitchen. When I peeked around the corner, I saw Mum sitting at the table, her makeup streaking down her face. Dad was pacing back and forth, his movements jerky and unpredictable, in the way that always made my stomach tighten with anxiety. "It's gone, all of it," Mum was saying between sobs. "The savings, the money for bills, everything." Dad slammed his fist against the refrigerator. "I told you I had a system. The cards were supposed to turn. They always turn eventually. $20,000, Tom, our entire savings plus the cash advance on my credit card. What are we supposed to do now?" Mum's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard before. I stood frozen in the doorway, trying to make myself invisible, but the floorboard beneath me creaked and both their heads snapped in my direction. "What are you looking at?" Dad growled, his eyes unfocused. I held up my math test with trembling hands. "I got 100%. Mum barely glanced at it before turning away. Dad laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was hollow and frightening. 100%, he mimicked. "Fat lot of good that'll do us now." I lowered the paper, feeling foolish for thinking it would matter. I should have backed out of the room, then retreated to my bedroom as I usually did when things got tense. But I was hungry, and I hadn't eaten since lunch at school. "Is there anything for dinner?" I asked quietly. Mum burst into fresh tears. Dad's face darkened, his complexion turning an alarming shade of red. "Dinner? You're worried about dinner. We're about to lose this house, and you're asking about dinner." His voice rose with each word. I took a step backward, bumping into the counter. My elbow knocked against a glass, sending it crashing to the floor. The shattering sound seemed to trigger something in Dad. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm so tightly it hurt. "Look what you did now, another mess for us to clean up." "I'm sorry," I whimpered, tears springing to my eyes. "I didn't mean to." "You never mean to do you, Hannah, but you're always causing problems," he snarled. Mum stood up suddenly. "This isn't her fault, Tom." For a moment I thought she was defending me, but then she continued. "None of this would have happened if we hadn't had her so young. We could have finished college, gotten better jobs. We wouldn't be stuck in this dump living paycheck to paycheck." Her words hit me like physical blows. I'd never heard her talk like this before. "That's right." Dad nodded vigorously, still gripping my arm. "Everything was fine until you came along. Every single problem in our lives can be traced back to you." "But I didn't ask to be born," I said softly, the words escaping before I could stop them. That's when Dad exploded. "Don't you talk back to me in my own house." He dragged me through the living room, my feet barely touching the ground. I was crying openly now, begging him to stop apologizing, though I didn't know what for. Mum followed behind, not interfering, her face a mask I couldn't read. Dad flung open the front door and pushed me outside. I stumbled on the porch steps, nearly falling. He disappeared back into the house for a moment, then returned with my old backpack, the one I'd used last year before getting a new one for second grade. He threw it at my feet. "There's a sandwich and some clothes in there. Now get out and don't come back. We're done playing house. We're done pretending." "Tom, the neighbours," Mum hissed, looking nervously at the houses across the street. "I don't care about the neighbours. I care about the fact that we're about to be homeless, because I can't think straight with a kid always underfoot." He turned back to me, pointing his finger in my face. "This is your fault. All of it." "Please," I sobbed, reaching for my mother. "Mom, please don't let him do this." For one heartbreaking moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or doubt. But then she hardened, stepping back into the house. "Maybe your precious Aunt Sarah will take you in. She always thought she could do a better job anyway," she said coldly. Dad gave me one final push. "Don't come back, Hannah. We mean it." The door slammed shut with such force that the porch light flickered. I stood there in shock, my backpack at my feet, the October wind cutting through my thin jacket. Through the window, I could see them resuming their argument, already forgetting about the child they'd just expelled from their lives. I couldn't process what had just happened. Parents didn't throw their children out. That wasn't something that happened in real life. Any minute now, they would come to their senses, open the door, and bring me back inside with apologies and hugs. But minutes passed, and the door remained closed. Darkness was falling, and with it the temperature dropped further. I picked up the backpack with numb fingers and slowly backed away from the only home I'd ever known. I was 8 years old and I had nowhere to go. The street lamps flickered on as I wandered away from our house, casting long shadows that seemed to follow me like silent accusers. Each step I took increased the distance between me and everything familiar, yet I couldn't bring myself to look back. The weight of the backpack felt strange, filled with whatever my father had hastily stuffed inside. Our neighborhood was quiet that evening. Occasionally I'd pass houses with warm light spilling from windows, silhouettes of families moving about inside. I could smell dinner cooking, hear faint laughter, normal families doing normal things while my world had just shattered into a million pieces. The cold began to seep through my clothes. I'd left that morning wearing just jeans, a long-sleeved shirt and a light jacket, unprepared for the evening chill or the fact that I wouldn't be returning home. My teeth started to chatter and I hugged myself tightly, trying to generate warmth. Where was I supposed to go? Aunt Sarah lived 2 hours away in Cincinnati, and I had no idea how to get there. I didn't know her phone number by heart, or even her exact address, just that she lived in a yellow house with a big oak tree in the yard. The reality of my situation slowly dawned on me as I walked. I was completely alone, 8 years old and abandoned by the very people who were supposed to protect me. The tears came again, hot against my cold cheeks. I found myself at the small community park about 6 blocks from our house. During the day it was filled with children and parents, but now it sat empty under the darkening sky. I made my way to the play structure, crawling underneath the plastic slide, where the wind couldn't reach me quite as easily. Opening the backpack, I discovered what my father had packed: a squished peanut butter sandwich in a plastic bag, a wrinkled t-shirt that I'd outgrown last summer, a pair of socks with holes in the toes, and an old flashlight with fading batteries. No coat, no money, nothing useful for a child suddenly forced to fend for herself. I ate half the sandwich slowly, trying to make it last. Who knew when I'd get food again? The peanut butter stuck to the roof of my mouth and I wished I had water to wash it down. "You all right there, little one?" The voice startled me so badly I hit my head on the underside of the slide. An older man with a weathered face and a grey beard was peering at me. He wore multiple layers of mismatched clothes and carried a plastic bag filled with cans. I shrank back, remembering all the warnings about strangers. "Don't be scared," he said, keeping his distance. "Just not used to seeing kids in the park this late. Where are your folks?" I couldn't answer, my throat closing up with fresh tears. The man's eyes softened with understanding. "Ah, I see. Got nowhere to go tonight, huh?" I nodded slightly, still wary. "Name's James," he said, sitting down on a nearby bench. "I'm in a similar boat myself. Mind if I rest here a while?" He didn't come any closer, which made me feel a little safer. After a few minutes of silence, he reached into his coat and pulled out half a loaf of bread. "Bakery throws these out at closing time. Still perfectly good." He tore off a piece and held it out to me. "You look hungry." My stomach growled loudly, betraying me. I hesitated, then quickly darted out to take the bread before retreating back under the slide. "Thank you," I whispered. James nodded. "Been on these streets 3 years now. Lost my job, then my house, then my family. Alcohol was my downfall." He looked at me seriously. "Whatever brought you here, just know it's not your fault. Grown-ups make their own messes." We sat in companionable silence for a while, James occasionally offering quiet observations about the stars appearing overhead or the distant sound of traffic. He never asked me directly what happened, and I was grateful for that. As it got later, James stood up. "I've got to head to the shelter before they close the doors for the night." He hesitated. "You should come too. It's not great, but it's warm." I shook my head, fear gripping me. "They'll call the police. I'll be sent to an orphanage." James didn't argue. "Suit yourself, little one, but don't stay out all night. It gets mighty cold." He left me his extra pair of gloves before shuffling away his plastic bag, rattling with each step. Once alone, I tried to think of a plan. I remembered seeing a payphone near the convenience store a few blocks away. Maybe I could call Aunt Sarah, but I didn't know her number. Still, it seemed worth trying. The walk to the store felt much longer in the growing darkness. When I finally reached the payphone, I realized another problem. I had no money for the call. I stood there staring at the phone, feeling utterly helpless. A police car drove slowly down the street and panic seized me. What if they saw me? What if they took me to some terrible place where I'd never see anyone I knew again? I ducked behind a dumpster until the car passed, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. By now it was fully night, and raindrops began to fall light at first, then heavier. I ran to find shelter, eventually huddling under the awning of a closed hardware store. The temperature had dropped further, and my thin clothes were no match for the October night. Even with James's gloves, I couldn't stop shivering. Hours passed like this. I dozed off occasionally, jerking awake at every sound. Distant sirens, cars passing. Once a group of teenagers walked by, laughing loudly, and I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, terrified of being discovered. Around what must have been midnight, another police car cruised by, this one moving slowly with a spotlight sweeping across storefronts. Had someone reported a missing child? Were my parents looking for me after all? Or were they searching for me to take me somewhere worse? The spotlight swung in my direction, and before I could think, I bolted. Running blindly through the rain, slipping on wet sidewalks, I fled until I couldn't hear the car anymore. I found myself in a residential area I recognized from my walks to school. That's when I remembered Emma Taylor, a girl from my class who lived nearby. We weren't close friends, but she had invited me to her birthday party last month, and her mother had always smiled kindly at me during school events. Maybe they would help me. Finding Emma's house took some wandering through similar-looking streets, but eventually I recognized the blue tricycle in the yard. It was nearly 1 a.m. and all the lights were off. I stood at the end of the driveway, paralyzed with indecision. Would they be angry if I woke them? Would they turn me away too? Desperation finally won out over fear. Soaking wet, exhausted, and crying again, I approached the front door and rang the doorbell. The porch light came on almost immediately, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. Emma's mother answered, wearing a bathrobe and an expression that quickly shifted from annoyance to shock. "Hannah! Oh my God, what happened to you?" I couldn't speak through my sobs. She pulled me inside, calling for her husband. They wrapped me in a blanket, sat me at their kitchen table, and gave me hot chocolate while I hiccuped out my story. "They just put you out in this weather." Emma's father looked furious, pacing the kitchen. Her mother was already on the phone. "Do you know your Aunt Sarah's last name, honey? We need to contact her." "Taylor," I managed. "Sarah and Jake Taylor, in Cincinnati." Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, sleepily confused by the commotion. Her mother gently sent her back to bed with promises of explanations in the morning. It took an hour of phone calls first to information to find the number, then multiple attempts to reach Aunt Sarah. When they finally got through, I could hear my aunt's voice through the phone rising in pitch as Emma's mother explained the situation. "She's on her way," Emma's mother told me, hanging up. "It's a 2-hour drive, but she's leaving right now. She should be here by morning." They made up the couch for me with soft blankets and a pillow that smelled like fabric softener. Before turning out the light, Emma's mother sat beside me, brushing wet hair from my forehead. "You're safe now," she said firmly. "What your parents did was wrong, and it wasn't your fault. Not one bit of it." It was the first time an adult had said those words to me, and something inside me broke and began to heal simultaneously. I fell asleep to the sound of rain on the windows and the knowledge that someone was coming for me. Someone who wanted me. I must have finally fallen into an exhausted sleep because the next thing I remember is being gently shaken awake. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar curtains, and for a moment I didn't know where I was. Then I saw my Aunt Sarah's face, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, her blonde hair hastily pulled back. "Hannah," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh, Hannah." I launched myself into her arms, clinging to her like she might disappear if I let go. She smelled like vanilla and coffee scents I'd always associated with safety because of her. She held me tight, rocking slightly, murmuring reassurances into my hair. "I've got you now. You're okay. I'm here." Emma's parents stood nearby, watching with relieved expressions. They'd given me breakfast earlier, pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse that I could barely eat despite my hunger. My stomach was too tied in knots. "Thank you for taking her in," Aunt Sarah said to them. "I can't imagine what would have happened if—" She didn't finish the sentence, but we all knew what she meant. If Emma's family hadn't answered their door, if I'd spent the entire night outside, if no one had found me. "We've already called the police," Emma's father said quietly. "They're sending someone over to your sister's house. What they did is criminal neglect at the very least." Aunt Sarah nodded grimly. "I'll be speaking with them too, and a lawyer." She looked down at me, softening her voice. "Are you ready to go? Sweetie, Uncle Jake is waiting for us back home." Home. The word felt strange and wonderful at the same time. I nodded, gathering the few belongings I had, including the old backpack my father had thrown at me. Emma's mother knelt down to my level. "You come visit us anytime, Hannah. Emma would love to have you for a sleepover under better circumstances." Emma, who had been watching shyly from the hallway, came forward and gave me a quick hug. "See you at school." I looked questioningly at Aunt Sarah. "We'll figure everything out," she promised, though I could tell she wasn't sure herself. The drive to Cincinnati was mostly silent. I stared out the window, watching familiar landscapes give way to new ones. Aunt Sarah kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with worry and something else, something that looked like anger but wasn't directed at me. "Your Uncle Jake is getting your room ready," she said eventually. "We have a spare bedroom that's all yours now. It's not fancy, but we can decorate it however you want." Really? The concept of having my own room, one that wasn't filled with memories of hiding from shouting, seemed too good to be true. "Really? And Hannah," she caught my eye in the mirror, "what your parents did was wrong. So wrong. Adults are supposed to take care of children, not the other way around. None of this is your fault." There it was again, that absolution that made my chest feel both lighter and heavier. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake lived in a modest ranch-style house in a quiet suburb. It was yellow with white trim, just as I remembered from our few visits. The big oak tree in the front yard was shedding its leaves, creating a colourful carpet across the lawn. Uncle Jake was waiting on the porch when we pulled up. He was tall with kind eyes and a beard that was starting to show flecks of grey. I'd always liked him, though I didn't know him well. He came down the steps as we parked, opening my car door with a gentle smile. "Welcome home, Hannah," he said simply. Those 3 words nearly undid me. I started crying again, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. Uncle Jake didn't hesitate, scooping me up like I weighed nothing and carrying me inside, murmuring reassurances the whole way. The house was warm and smelled like cinnamon. It wasn't large or fancy, but it was clean and bright with plants in the windows and photos on the walls. Uncle Jake carried me to a room at the end of the hallway. "Here's your space," he said, setting me down carefully. "It's not much yet, but it's yours for as long as you need it." The room was simple. A twin bed with fresh blue bedding, a small desk by the window, a dresser and empty bookshelves. Someone had placed a stuffed bear on the pillow and hung colourful curtains that matched the bedspread. "We can paint the walls if you want," Aunt Sarah said from the doorway. "Make it really yours." I walked around the room, touching things gently as if they might disappear. No one had ever offered me my own space before, decorated just for me. In that moment, the gravity of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours crashed down on me and my legs gave way. I sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Uncle Jake and Aunt Sarah were immediately beside me, their voices calm but concerned. "It's okay to feel everything you're feeling," Uncle Jake said. "It's a lot to process." Why didn't they want me? I asked the question that had been burning inside me since the moment that door slammed shut. Aunt Sarah's face crumpled. "Oh, Hannah, this isn't about you not being wanted or loved enough. Your parents are very sick. They're addicted to things that make them unable to think clearly or make good decisions. It's a disease that's affected their brains." "Like when people get cancer?" I asked, trying to understand. "Something like that," Uncle Jake nodded. "But a disease of choices and behaviour, one they need special help for, help they haven't been willing to get." "Will they get better?" Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. "I don't know, sweetie," Aunt Sarah said honestly. "But what I do know is that you're safe now, and we're going to make sure you stay that way." The next few days passed in a blur. There were visits from a lady named Ms. Patel, who introduced herself as a social worker. She asked me lots of questions about life with my parents, things I found hard to talk about. Had they hit me? Had they left me alone often? Was there always food in the house? Each answer seemed to make her face grow more serious. At night, I had terrible nightmares. I'd wake up screaming, convinced I was still under that slide in the park, or that my parents were locking me out again. Aunt Sarah would come running, holding me until I calmed down. Sometimes I'd end up sleeping in their big bed, sandwiched safely between her and Uncle Jake. I didn't talk much during those first days. It was as if all my words had frozen inside me. I'd nod or shake my head, sometimes write notes on the pad of paper Aunt Sarah gave me, but actual speaking felt too difficult. About a week after I arrived, Aunt Sarah sat me down at the kitchen table. Her expression was serious, but kind. "Hannah, there's going to be a hearing at the courthouse next week. The judge needs to decide where you'll live permanently." Fear clutched at my throat. "Do I have to go back to them?" "No," she said firmly. "That's not an option. But I need to ask you something important. Would you like to stay here with Uncle Jake and me, because we'd very much like you to?" "Forever?" I whispered, hardly daring to hope. Forever, she confirmed. We'd become your guardians legally. This would be your home. What about Mom and Dad? Do they want me back? The question hurt to ask, but I needed to know. Aunt Sarah's eyes flashed with that same anger I'd seen in the car. They've been difficult about the whole situation. Your mother, my sister, she's not thinking clearly. She's angry at me for getting involved. So they don't want me, I said flatly. Hannah, look at me. Aunt Sarah took my hands. What they want or don't want doesn't matter anymore. They gave up their right to have a say when they put you out in the cold. What matters now is what you want and what's best for you. For the first time since that terrible night, I felt a tiny spark of something like power. My opinion mattered. What I wanted counted for something. I want to stay with you, I said, finding my voice at last. I don't want to go back. Aunt Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Then that's what we'll fight for. The custody hearing was scary. The courtroom seemed enormous with its high ceilings and dark wood panels. I had to wear an itchy dress and sit very still while adults talked about me as if I wasn't there. My parents were present, sitting across the room, not looking at me. Mum's eyes were vacant, her hair unwashed. Dad looked angry, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. Their lawyer argued that they had made a regrettable mistake while under extreme financial stress, that they deserved another chance with support services, that breaking up a family should be a last resort. Aunt Sarah's lawyer presented evidence of the neglect that had been going on long before that night. My teacher, Mrs. Wilson, testified about my frequently unwashed clothes, my constant hunger, how I'd fall asleep in class from apparent exhaustion. Emma's parents described the state I was in when I arrived at their door. Miss Patel shared her findings from her home investigation and interviews. When it was my turn to speak to the judge privately in his chambers, I found my voice again stronger than before. I told him everything, about the fighting, the drinking, the empty refrigerator, about making my own meals and putting myself to bed, about being thrown out like I was nothing. And where do you want to live, Hannah? The judge asked kindly. With Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake, I said without hesitation. They make me feel safe. In the end, the judge awarded temporary custody to my aunt and uncle, with a review scheduled for 6 months later. My parents were granted supervised visitation rights, though neither of them approached me after the hearing. They left quickly, my mother in tears, my father stone-faced. I watched them go with a strange emptiness in my chest, like something vital had been removed but without pain. As we drove back to Cincinnati to my new home, Aunt Sarah reached back and squeezed my hand. It's going to be okay, Hannah. We're going to build something good together. For the first time, I actually believed her. The next few months were a period of slow adjustment. Aunt Sarah enrolled me in the local elementary school, where I started fresh in a second-grade classroom full of unfamiliar faces. The other kids were curious about the new girl who arrived in the middle of the school year, but I kept to myself, afraid to form connections that might be broken. My new teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, was patient with my silence. She gave me extra time on assignments and never called on me unless my hand was raised, which was rare in those early days. Sometimes during recess, I'd stay inside with her, helping to clean erasers or organize books rather than face the chaotic playground. You're a good helper, Hannah, she'd say, and the simple praise would warm me from the inside. At home, Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake moved carefully around me as if I might shatter at any moment. And truthfully, I felt that fragile. The smallest things would trigger overwhelming emotions, a lifetime's worth of held-back tears demanding release all at once. A commercial with a happy family eating dinner together. The smell of the same laundry detergent my mother used to buy. A car that backfired, sounding like my father slamming doors in anger. Each would send me into a state of panic or tears that I couldn't control or explain. You're experiencing something called trauma, explained Dr. Linda, the child psychologist Aunt Sarah took me to see twice a week. Your body and mind are still scared from what happened, and they're trying to protect you from being hurt again. Dr. Linda had a bright office with squashy chairs and shelves full of toys and art supplies. She never forced me to talk about my parents if I didn't want to. Instead, she taught me ways to feel safe in my own body again. When you start feeling scared or overwhelmed, I want you to try something, she said during one session. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. I practiced this grounding technique often, especially at night, when the nightmares would come. They were always the same me standing outside my parents' door, knocking and begging to be let in while they ignored my cries. I can see my blue curtains, my stuffed bear, the nightlight, the bookshelf, and the ceiling, I'd whisper into the darkness. I can touch my blanket, my pillow, my pajamas, and my hair. Gradually, the nightmares became less frequent, the panic attacks less intense, the tears less sudden. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake celebrated each small victory with me. "You made it through a whole school day without calling me," Aunt Sarah said proudly one afternoon, referring to the daily check-ins that had been necessary at first. "You're sleeping in your own bed all night now," Uncle Jake noted with a high five after the first week without midnight migrations to their room. They were endlessly patient with my quirks and fears. I hoarded food in my room at first, stuffing dinner rolls and fruit into my pockets to hide under the bed, just in case. Instead of getting angry when they discovered my stash, they simply put a small basket of non-perishable snacks on my nightstand. "These are just for you," Uncle Jake explained. "You don't have to hide food anymore. There will always be enough." I tested them in small ways, perhaps unconsciously. I'd forget to do a chore or talk back over something minor, waiting for the explosion of anger I'd grown accustomed to. It never came. There were consequences, yes, like having to finish the chore before watching TV, but never screaming, never threats, never rejection. Uncle Jake, who worked as a graphic designer from a home office, would sometimes invite me to sit with him while he worked. He taught me to use simple drawing programs on his computer, patiently showing me how to create digital art. "You've got a good eye for color," he'd comment, as I experimented with different combinations. Aunt Sarah, a nurse at the children's hospital, would bring home stories about the brave kids she worked with, subtly showing me I wasn't alone in facing difficult circumstances. "One of my patients today reminded me of you," she'd say. "So resilient, so strong. Art became my refuge and my voice when words failed me." I filled sketchbooks with colorful drawings, some bright and hopeful, others dark and chaotic. Dr. Linda encouraged this expression, helping me understand what my artwork was communicating. "This picture has a lot of black and red," she observed one day, looking at my latest creation. "Those can be angry colors. Are you feeling angry today?" I nodded, staring at my hands. "It's okay to be angry, Hannah. Anger is just another feeling like happiness or sadness. It's what we do with our anger that matters." Slowly, I began to open up, first through art, then through words. The dam broke. During a session with Dr. Linda, about 4 months after coming to live with my aunt and uncle, why didn't they love me enough? I suddenly sobbed, the question bursting out of me after months of holding it in. What did I do wrong? Dr. Linda moved to sit beside me, her voice gentle but firm. "You did nothing wrong, Hannah. Nothing. Some adults are not capable of being good parents. Their problems, their addictions, their choices, none of that is a reflection on you or your worthiness of love." I cried for what felt like hours, releasing years of confusion, hurt, and self-blame. Dr. Linda sat with me through it all, offering tissues and validation and safety. That night, I told Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake what had happened during therapy. "Dr. Linda says I'm not the reason they acted that way," I said, testing how the words felt in my mouth. "She's absolutely right," Aunt Sarah confirmed. "Your mother is my sister and I love her, but I've watched her make self-destructive choices since we were teenagers. Long before you were born. None of that is on you." Uncle Jake nodded in agreement. "Some people aren't ready to be parents. Some never will be. But Hannah, there are plenty of people in this world who are ready to love you exactly as you are. We're 2 of them." About 6 months after I came to live with them, Aunt Sarah received a call from an old neighbour in my hometown. Through the grapevine, she'd heard that my parents had divorced. Mum had moved to Kentucky with a new boyfriend. Dad was still in the same house, though there were rumours it might be foreclosed on soon. Neither of them had attempted to contact me, not even once. When Aunt Sarah told me this news, waiting for my reaction with worried eyes, I surprised myself with what I felt relief. The fantasy that they might suddenly transform into loving, responsible parents had been quietly haunting me. Now I could let it go. "Does this mean I can stay with you forever?" I asked. "We're going to make sure of it," Uncle Jake promised. The 6-month review came, and with no opposition from my biological parents, the judge granted permanent guardianship to Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake. They asked if I wanted to change my last name to Taylor, but didn't pressure me when I hesitated. "There's no rush," Aunt Sarah assured me. "It's your identity, your choice." As the 1-year anniversary of that terrible night approached, I found myself thinking more about the past. I asked Aunt Sarah if we could drive back to my old town just to see it once more. "Are you sure?" she asked, concerned. "It might bring up difficult feelings." "I think I need to," I said. to know it was real and that it's really over. So on a Saturday in October, almost exactly a year after I'd been thrown out, we drove the 2 hours back to my hometown. We passed by my old school where Mrs. Wilson still taught. We drove through the park where I'd met James, the homeless man, though he wasn't there now. We cruised slowly past Emma Taylor's house, where I'd found safety that night. And finally, we parked across from my old house. It looked smaller than I remembered, more run down. The yard was overgrown, and there was a for sale by bank sign in the front yard. I stared at the house, waiting for the flood of emotion, the panic, the tears, but they didn't come. Instead, I felt oddly detached, as if I were looking at a place from a movie I'd seen long ago, not somewhere I'd actually lived. It doesn't feel like home anymore, I said, surprised by the realization. Aunt Sarah squeezed my hand. That's because it's not. Home is waiting for us back in Cincinnati. As we drove away, I didn't look back. That house, that life, those parents, they were part of my past now. A past I couldn't change, but one I was learning to accept and integrate into my story. What waited ahead was far more important, a home where I was wanted adults who kept their promises and the slow, steady healing of a heart that had been broken but was growing stronger with each passing day. By the time I turned 16, the nightmares had largely faded. I still had them occasionally, especially during stressful periods like exams or the anniversary of that October night, but they no longer controlled my life. 8 years with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake had given me the stability I desperately needed. I'd grown into a different person than the frightened 8-year-old who showed up on their doorstep. My therapist sessions had decreased to monthly check-ins, and I'd developed healthy coping mechanisms for when anxiety struck. Art remained my primary outlet, and I'd become quite skilled winning several school competitions for my paintings and digital designs. School was a place where I thrived now. I maintained straight A's and had a small but loyal group of friends who knew pieces of my story but didn't define me by my past. I'd joined the yearbook committee, putting my design skills to use, and volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends. Life had fallen into a comfortable rhythm, one I never took for granted. Every morning, Aunt Sarah would leave a note in my lunch with an encouraging message or silly joke. Every evening, Uncle Jake would ask about my day, genuinely interested in even the smallest details. They never missed a school event, sitting front row at every art show and academic ceremony. When I turned 15, I'd finally decided to legally change my last name to Taylor. It felt right to share their name, to officially become part of their family in every way possible. The day the paperwork was finalized, we had a small celebration dinner, complete with a cake that read, "Hannah Taylor, officially ours." I hadn't had any contact with my biological parents in all those years. Sometimes I would Google them out of curiosity, discovering fragments of their lives through public records and social media. My mother had married and divorced again, moving from Kentucky to Florida. My father had left Ohio too, relocating to Nevada, according to a LinkedIn profile I found. They existed as abstractions in my mind, rather than real people with whom I shared DNA. I'd made peace with their absence, or so I thought, until the day I literally ran into my mother at the Northgate Mall in Cincinnati. I was shopping for a dress for the winter formal with my best friend Zoe when I rounded a corner and collided with a woman coming out of a store. "I'm so sorry," I started to say, then froze. Though 8 years had passed, I recognized her immediately. Her blonde hair was shorter now, with obvious grey roots, and lines had deepened around her eyes and mouth. But it was unmistakably her, my mother, standing before me, with the same shocked expression I imagined was on my face. "Hannah," she whispered, her eyes widening. "Is that you?" I couldn't speak. My heart hammered wildly in my chest, and I felt Zoe's concerned hand on my arm. "My God, look at you. You're all grown up," my mother continued, her eyes taking me in. "You look just like I did at your age." The comparison made me feel sick. I managed to find my voice, though it came out strangled. "What are you doing in Cincinnati?" "I moved back last month," she said. "Got a job at the call center over on Elm Street." "Khan." She took a hesitant step toward me. "Hannah, I've thought about you so often." I took an instinctive step backward. "No," I said, my voice stronger now. "You don't get to say that." Her face fell. "I know you must hate me. What we did, what I allowed to happen, it was unforgivable." "Then why are you here talking to me like we're old friends catching up?" I demanded, anger rising like a tide. "I thought maybe now that you're older we could talk. I could explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off. "Explain why you stood there and watched while Dad threw your 8-year-old daughter out into the cold. Explain why you never once called or wrote or tried to see if I was okay. People were starting to stare, but I didn't care. Years of therapy had taught me to express my feelings rather than bottle them up. "You're right, Hannah," she said softly. "There's no explanation that could ever be good enough." She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a business card. "But if you ever want to talk my numbers on here, I understand if you don't." I took the card automatically, too stunned to refuse. She gazed at me a moment longer, then walked away, shoulders hunched. Zoe waited until she was out of sight before speaking. "That was your birth, Mum?" she asked gently. I nodded, staring at the card in my hand. It listed her as Marion Winters, with a local phone number and address. She'd remarried, taken a new name, started a new life, just as I had. "Do you want to go home?" Zoe offered. "We can forget about dress shopping." "No," I said, surprising myself. "I'm not going to let her ruin today." I crumpled the card and dropped it in a nearby trash can. I have a life to live, but later that night, alone in my room, the encounter caught up with me. I cried for the first time in months, not sure if the tears were from anger, grief, or something else entirely. Aunt Sarah heard me from the hallway and came in sitting beside me on the bed without saying a word, just offering her presence until I was ready to talk. "I saw her today," I finally said. "My mother, at the mall." I felt Aunt Sarah stiffen slightly. "What did she want?" I recounted the brief conversation, including the discarded business card. "How do you feel about it?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Angry? Confused?" I wiped my eyes. She acted like she had some explanation that would make what they did okay, like we could just pick up and have some kind of relationship. "And that's not something you want." I looked at her, surprised by the question. "No, you and Uncle Jake are my parents in every way that matters. You're the ones who've been there for everything, the good and bad." Aunt Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "We love you so much, Hannah. You know that, right? More than I ever thought it was possible to love another human being." "I know," I said, hugging her tightly. That's why seeing her felt so wrong. She gave up any right to be in my life that night. A few months after the mall encounter, we received unexpected news. My father had been hospitalized in Las Vegas with late-stage liver disease, a consequence of years of heavy drinking. The hospital had tracked down Aunt Sarah as his next of kin after finding her information in his wallet. "He's asking to see you," she told me cautiously. "The doctors don't think he has much time left." I was 17 now, less than a year from graduation, with plans to attend art school in Chicago. My father had been absent for more than half my life, a ghostly figure in increasingly distant memories. "I don't owe him anything," I said immediately. "No, you absolutely don't," Uncle Jake agreed. "This is completely your decision." I tried to go about my normal routine, pushing the news to the back of my mind. But at night, lying awake, I found myself wondering, would I regret not seeing him one last time? Not saying the things I'd rehearsed in therapy sessions over the years, not seeing for myself the man who had shaped so much of my life through his absence. After a week of internal debate, I made my decision. "I want to go," I told Aunt Sarah over breakfast. "I need to see him to close that chapter before I start the next phase of my life." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "We'll make the arrangements." The flight to Las Vegas was my first time on an airplane. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the novelty. Instead, I spent the 3 hours rehearsing what I would say, imagining different scenarios, trying to prepare myself for whatever condition I might find him in. Desert Springs Hospital was modern and well-maintained, nothing like the grim institution I'd pictured. My father had a private room, courtesy of a hospice program for terminal patients. Aunt Sarah had offered to come in with me, but this was something I needed to do alone. I paused outside his door, gathering my courage, then knocked softly before entering. The man in the hospital bed barely resembled the father in my memories. His once imposing frame had shrunk, his skin yellow with jaundice, his arms thin and mapped with bruises from IV needles. The smell of antiseptic couldn't quite mask the sickly sweet odor of a body shutting down. His eyes, however, were the same, brightening with recognition as I approached. "Hannah," he whispered, his voice raspy. "You came." I stood at the foot of his bed, maintaining my distance. "Yes." "Look at you," he said, a tear sliding down his hollow cheek. "All grown up and beautiful. Sarah's done right by you." "She has," I agreed. "She and Uncle Jake gave me everything you and Mum couldn't, or wouldn't." He winced at my directness but nodded. "I deserve that. I deserve your hatred." I says, "I don't hate you," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Hate requires energy and attention. For a long time I was too busy surviving to hate you, and then I was too busy thriving. Good, he said, closing his eyes briefly. That's good. You deserved better than us, Hannah. Better than me. Yes, I did, I said simply. He gestured weakly to the chair beside his bed. Will you sit just for a minute? There are things I need to say while I still can. I hesitated, then sat, keeping my posture rigid, my hands folded in my lap. I've been in rehab 4 times, he began. Never could make it stick until the doctors told me my liver was shot. Too little, too late. He coughed, the sound wet and painful. There's no excuse for what we did to you. None. I've thought about that night every day since. So have I said quietly. I was a coward, he continued, gambling away everything, then blaming a child for my failures. Goddamn. His breathing was laboured, each word an effort. I don't expect forgiveness, Hannah. I just needed you to know that I recognise what I did, the harm I caused. It was never your fault, not one bit of it. The words I'd waited so long to hear, coming far too late from a dying man. I felt tears threatening but held them back. Thank you for saying that, I managed. He reached for a small envelope on his bedside table, his hand trembling with the effort. There's a little money in here, not much. Hospital bills took most of what I had, but I want you to have it. For college, maybe. I took the envelope without opening it. I don't need your money. I have scholarships. And Sarah and Jake have been saving for my education since I was 9. A sad smile flickered across his face. Of course they have. They're good people. He closed his eyes again, fatigue evident in every line of his body. I'm glad you found your way to them, even if it was because of my terrible choices. And I sat with him a while longer as he drifted in and out of consciousness. Despite everything, there was something peaceful about being present as he faced the end. Not for his sake, but for mine. For closure. Before I left, I took his hand briefly. Goodbye, Dad. His fingers tightened slightly around mine. You're going to have an amazing life, Hannah. The kind I should have helped give you. Walking out of that hospital room, I felt lighter somehow. Not because I had forgiven him entirely, but because I had reclaimed the narrative. I was no longer just a victim of his actions. I was a survivor who had built a beautiful life despite them. He died 3 weeks later. I attended the small funeral with Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake, standing at the back of the chapel observing the handful of mourners, most of whom were strangers to me. My mother didn't attend. I wondered if she even knew. As we drove away from the cemetery, Uncle Jake asked, "How are you feeling?" I thought about it carefully. "Free," I finally answered. Like I can stop carrying him with me now. They both nodded understanding, as they always did. We drove home to Cincinnati, to the yellow house with the oak tree, to the only real home I'd ever known. My name is Hannah Taylor, and I'm 34 years old now. The frightened 8-year-old girl who was thrown out into the cold that October night seems like a different person, sometimes a character from a story I read long ago. But she's still part of me, woven into the fabric of who I've become. Life has a way of coming full circle. The same events that nearly destroyed me as a child ultimately shaped me into someone stronger, more compassionate, and deeply appreciative of what truly matters. Every morning I wake up grateful for the family I found, the life I built, and the darkness I overcame. After graduating from art school, I combined my passion for creativity with my interest in psychology, becoming an art therapist specializing in childhood trauma. Now I work at a centre for at-risk youth, helping kids who have experienced abuse, neglect, or abandonment express what they can't yet put into words. When I see the relief in their eyes as they put paint to paper, I recognise my younger self finding that same outlet. Art saved me, I often tell them. It can save you too. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jake, whom I've called Mum and Dad for years now, are still the anchors in my life. They're in their 60s now, talking about retirement, though I can't imagine either of them slowing down much. They've been married for almost 40 years, showing me what a healthy, loving relationship looks like day after day. We got the daughter we always wanted, Dad says whenever he introduces me to someone new, just not in the way we expected. 10 years ago, I married David, a kind and steady man who knows my entire story and has never once made me feel damaged because of it. We met in a community garden project, both volunteering to teach art to elementary school students. His patience with the children, his genuine interest in their creations, told me everything I needed to know about his character before we'd even had our first date. I'm complicated, I warned him early on. My past is messy. Everyone's complicated, he replied simply. And I'm more interested in your future than your past. 5 years into our marriage, I found myself unexpectedly pregnant. The news brought a complex mix of joy and terror. What if I couldn't be a good mother? What if generational trauma couldn't be overcome? What if I somehow turned into my own mother when faced with the stress of parenthood? I don't know how to be a parent. I confessed to David one night, tears streaming down my face. I never had the right example. He held me close, his voice steady. That's not true. You had Sarah and Jake. You know exactly what loving, supportive parents look like. He was right, of course. And when our daughter Lily was born, I discovered that the fear of becoming my mother was unfounded. Every instinct I had was to protect this tiny person, to make her feel secure and loved in ways I hadn't been. Now Lily is 4, bright and curious and obsessed with butterflies. She has David's gentle nature, and according to Mum, my artistic eye. Sometimes I watch her playing in our backyard, completely carefree, and marvel at how different her childhood is from mine. She will never know what it's like to be thrown away by the people who should love her most. She will never doubt her place in our family or question her worthiness of love. Making sure of that is my life's most important work. About a year ago, I decided to try once more to find my mother. Not for reconciliation, but for resolution. David supported the decision, though he worried about the potential for more hurt. Through social media and public records, I discovered she had moved back to our original hometown in Ohio, completing a strange circle. The address I found led to a small apartment above a hardware store downtown. I debated sending a letter first, but decided a direct approach would be better. So on a crisp fall day, almost exactly 26 years after that fateful night, I knocked on her door. The woman who answered was a faded version of the mother in my memories. Her once blonde hair was completely grey, now her face deeply lined, her movements slow and cautious. She stared at me in shock, one hand flying to her throat. "Hannah," she whispered, just as she had in the mall all those years ago. "Hello," I said evenly. "May I come in?" Her apartment was sparsely furnished but neat. No signs of the chaos that had defined our old home. No evidence of alcohol or gambling. Just a simple, solitary life, carved out of whatever remained after decades of poor choices. "I've thought about you so often," she said, echoing her words from our last encounter. "Especially after Thomas passed." "I know," I replied. "I was at his funeral. This surprised her." "You were?" I didn't know he'd died until months later. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. I hadn't come with a script or agenda, just a need to see her one final time to understand if possible. "Are you happy, Hannah?" she finally asked. The question was so simple, yet so profound. "Yes," I answered truthfully. "I have a good life, a husband who loves me, a daughter who's the center of my world." Her eyes widened. "I'm a grandmother." "Biologically, yes," I said carefully. "But Sarah and Jake are the ones Lily calls Grandma and Grandpa. They've earned that." She nodded, accepting this reality without argument. "They were always better people than me. Sarah tried to help us, you know. Before that night, she offered money rehab for Thomas, a place for you to stay while we got help." She looked down at her hands. "We were too proud, too deep in denial." "And after?" I asked. "After you threw me out, why didn't you ever try to find me?" She took a shaky breath. "Shame," she admitted. "Overwhelming shame. The next morning, when we sobered up and realized what we'd done, it was too late. You were gone. The police came. Sarah was already filing for custody." She wiped away a tear. "I told myself you were better off without me. That became the excuse for not facing what I'd done. I studied her, this woman who had given me life, and then discarded me. There was no anger left, just a distant sadness for what might have been, for the mother-daughter relationship we never had. I didn't come for apologies," I said, "or explanations. I just needed to see you once more to know that I've truly moved beyond what happened." "And have you?" she asked. I nodded. "I have. I run an art therapy program for traumatized children. Every day I help kids who have stories like mine or worse. I'm married to a wonderful man. I'm a mother who breaks the cycle every single day by choosing love and presence over selfishness and escape." "You became everything I couldn't be," she said softly. "No," I corrected her. "I became who I was always meant to be, despite what happened to me, not because of it. I just had to find the right soil in which to grow." We talked a while longer, not about reconciliation or building a relationship, but about closure. About acknowledging the past without letting it dictate the future. When I left, I knew it would likely be the last time I saw her. She was part of a chapter that had finally completely closed. Driving home to Cincinnati to David and Lily and the life we'd built together, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from that terrified 8-year-old to the woman I am today wasn't easy or straightforward. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, old wounds that reopened when I least expected them. But there was also love, unwavering and consistent, from the family who chose me when my biological one wouldn't. Sarah and Jake Taylor didn't just save me that night. They showed me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stays, who fights for you, who creates space for you to become your best self. They taught me that home isn't a place, but a feeling of absolute safety and belonging. As a mother now myself, I understand even less how anyone could reject their child. When I look at Lily, I see only possibility and joy, not burden or blame. The cycle ends with me. The generational trauma stops here. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my parents hadn't thrown me out that night. If I had continued living in that toxic environment, absorbing their dysfunctions, internalizing their failures as my own, would I have eventually repeated their patterns? Would I have escaped in other ways? Or would I have been crushed under the weight of their problems? I'll never know. But I do know this: sometimes being thrown out of a house is the only way to find your true home. Sometimes the most painful rejection leads to the most profound acceptance. Sometimes what feels like the end is really just the beginning. Have you ever experienced a moment when what seemed like your worst day turned out to be the first step towards something better? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and hope. Remember that your past does not define your future, and that family is about love, not blood. Thank you for listening, and may you find or create the family you deserve.